Small Business Committee will come to order. Let me thank our ranking member, Senator Paul, for accommodating the change in time. As I think some are aware, there's a markup starting this afternoon in the Senate Finance Committee that some of our members need to be at. And there are a lot of other things going on, so we appreciate the change in schedule. It may affect some of our members' ability to be here in person. Administrator Guzman, I want to thank you also for the accommodation so that we could start this hearing at 1:30. It's been 14 months since Congress passed the CARES Act, and the SBA has really stood up to the challenge. Over $1 trillion in aid has been provided to American small businesses. In the Paycheck Protection Program alone, over 11 million forgivable loans have been issued, and the latest number I got at the tune of about $791 billion. There's now optimism among small businesses with the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine that businesses may be returning to a more normal volume. So let me first thank Administrator Guzman for your leadership. You hit the ground ready to go. You were particularly focused on our most vulnerable small businesses, and you made a real difference. I also want to thank your workforce because it was an extraordinary challenge for our federal workers at the Small Business Administration. You have supervised the expansion of the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL Advance Program, and you've stood up new programs, the Shuttered Venue Program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the Community Navigator Pilot Program. The key has been Congress and the administration, open lines of communication, working together to implement these tools for small business. Transparency is absolutely essential, and sharing information timely. And unlike in the previous administration, where Treasury took a good part of the lead in regards to the administration and implementation of the tools for small business, under the Biden administration, it's been the Small Business Administration that's had the principal responsibility. And I want to thank you for the transparency and information that you've made available to all the staff here in the Small Business Committee and to us personally in sharing information in a very timely way. The coordination between Congress and the executive branch is incorporated into the Economic Aid Act, which was passed this past December. And Treasury Secretary's appearance before this committee was included in that act. So I want to thank you for being here today in carrying out that legislative responsibility. We will arrange for a convenient time for Secretary Yellen to appear before our committee. We have had some discussions, and we are looking for a date in which she will be able to testify before the Small Business Committee. So I'm looking forward to this hearing and your update as to how these programs are working. The traditional lending programs were enhanced by the Economic Aid Act in December, so I'm curious as to how those modifications worked. We've changed the eligibility of the PPP program, both by legislation and by administrative action, so I'm curious as to how those changes have been implemented. The EIDL Advance Program, which is really one aimed at our most challenged small businesses, we need to know what outreach is being given so that those that could benefit from this program have an opportunity to participate, because we are concerned that they don't have the same avenues of information as other small businesses might have and might be left behind. The Community Navigator Pilot Program, the information notice was sent out on March the 3rd. We'd be interested to see how that program is moving forward. The Shuttered Venue Program, applications opened on April 26th, and you had, I believe, somewhere around 13,000 applications, so we'll be interested in that program. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, you start accepting applications on May the 3rd. I understand as of the middle of this month, you had over 300,000 applications for the Restaurant Revitalization Act. 57% were businesses of women, veteran-owned, or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, which is the priority, 21 days. It's my understanding that the funding there is not going to be enough to meet demand, and we appreciate your assessment as to where we are in regards to the monies that have been appropriated versus the demand as shown by the applications that have been filed. And just to let you know how important these programs are, last week, Administrator Guzman joined me and the second gentleman, Doug Imhoff, in a roundtable discussion to listen to restaurateurs in Annapolis, Maryland. And I must tell you, they made it very clear that they wouldn't be here today but for the PPP program, the EIDL program, and now the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Let me just deal with some of the what I heard during that visit. Monica Alvarado told about the harrowing experiences of deciding whether she could keep her restaurant open or not. There were days that she thought she was going to wouldn't be able to make it, but the tools allowed her to get through that period. She became more creative on online and delivery orders in addition to in-person dining, and today her future looks very bright. She was named Annapolis Person of the Year because of her leading efforts with other restaurant owners to help feed a community that desperately needed food during the pandemic, and helped her neighbors helping neighbors, and we certainly know that from our small business community. And then there's Spencer Jones, who owns Chicken Ruth's. I mentioned that because that's an iconic restaurant in Annapolis. I spent 20 years of my life in the state legislature in Annapolis. He had to take over suddenly after he lost his dad. He's optimistic, thanks to the SBA tools, and said he had the busiest week he's had since the pandemic. So things are coming back, and I think we can take pride in the fact that we were helped that come along. We now have another opportunity, the American Jobs Plan, and once in a generation investment in our infrastructure. So how can we use that opportunity to help underserved and disadvantaged communities? Last week, in a hearing on this committee, we heard about what we could do to help women-owned businesses and minority-owned small businesses. This must be our priority as to how we're going to help the underserved entrepreneurs. Administrator Guzman, you are the voice of small businesses, particularly those who have been underserved in the Biden administration. So we look forward to your testimony and how we can work together to support our nation's small businesses in the months and years to come. With that, let me turn to Senator Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After more than a year of arbitrary government regulation, Americans are finally getting some of their freedoms back. Just a few weeks ago, the CDC started to follow the science and admit to the public that there is no need for those who have been vaccinated to continue wearing masks. Public officials across the nation are finally beginning to allow businesses to reopen and children to get back to school. These actions should have been taken months ago and are only the first step as we begin to try to heal our nation and the economy from government's unnecessary intervention in our day-to-day lives. As inflation rises to the highest level since the Great Recession, it appears that we are starting to realize the cost of rampant government spending. I've heard it from many small businesses who are having trouble filling positions and experiencing exorbitant increases in the cost of materials. Earlier this month, I held a roundtable with Kentucky small business owners from a number of different industries. The message was clear. Economic lockdowns, the closures of our schools, and rehiring workers are the greatest challenges that small businesses face today. Mr. Chairman, I ask for the unanimous consent to submit the transcript of the roundtable into the record today.
Without objection, it will be included in the record.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government has spent $4.2 trillion on COVID-19 relief. Small Business Administration has been authorized to spend just under $1 trillion, making it one of the largest spenders in the COVID economy, second only to the Department of Treasury. Unfortunately, Treasury Secretary Yellen is not here today to answer for her department's use of those funds. Despite being required by law, I repeat that, required by law in a bill that was passed overwhelmingly to be here, she is not here today. Earlier this month, I sent Secretary Yellen a letter reminding her of that obligation, yet I have received no reply. Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to submit that letter for the record, along with a list of the public events Secretary Yellen has recently chosen to participate in instead of coming to this committee.
Without objection, it will be included in the record.
I also hope you will join me in calling on her to testify, including voting on a subpoena if necessary. Now I'd like to welcome Administrator Guzman. A few months ago at your nomination hearing, I supported your nomination in good faith with the expectation that you would be responsive and cooperative as the committee fulfills its oversight responsibilities. Unfortunately, this has not been the case. Since March, I've sent 5 letters requesting data and information necessary for the committee to conduct adequate oversight over the SBA's COVID-19 programs. To date, we have received only 2 responses, which fail to provide the complete information we've requested. The question we have at hand is whether or not groups in our country are receiving money illegally against the policy of the Small Business Administration. We have these questions on legality, and you are stonewalling us. This is money that's being given to the Planned Parenthood organization. We found at least 6 different loans that have been given. Among the letters that we sent were multiple requests for specific information about PPP loans, illegally made to Planned Parenthood affiliates. Since you've been confirmed, we found that at least 6 additional PPP loans have been made to Planned Parenthood for $17.6 million. This money is all in contravention to the SBA policy that it's illegal to give money to Planned Parenthood. In the previous administration, they made a ruling that Planned Parenthood wasn't eligible and Planned Parenthood was directed to send the money back. But this administration is continuing to send money to an organization that the previous administration set a policy that was consistent with a long-standing policy on affiliates getting funds. When your deputy was here the last time, we asked him, have you changed the policy? He says, no, the policy's still the same. And yet we can't get any explanation from you. We've given you the questions in advance. These loans were approved in defiance of the law, not in accordance with the law, and are just one of the many glaring issues with Small Business Administration programs. But unfortunately, we cannot be sure due to the continued failure on your part to be transparent and provide the committee with the information we need to do our job. I look forward to hearing your testimony, and I'm hopeful that we can find answers to our numerous outstanding questions.
Thank you, Senator Paul. Administrator Guzman, it's a pleasure to have you before our committee. Part of our record, you may proceed as you wish.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Paul, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to be here and for the opportunity to discuss SBA's programs and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. When I appeared before you as a nominee recently, I did mention how this unprecedented crisis has impacted our nation's 30 million small businesses and innovative startups, and it really created a sense of urgency for me as well as my team to work harder, think more creatively, and build more collaboration to meet the desperate need presented by this moment. In my first 2.5 months as SBA administrator, I can tell you that my motivation to deliver for our entrepreneurs has only intensified. And I have to share how proud I am of my incredible mission-driven team at the SBA, who, despite having had to scale at such a high intensity over the past 14 months, remain incredibly committed to our nation's entrepreneurs. They've been working around the clock to deliver the American Rescue Plan's crucial relief programs to ensure our small businesses can survive this disaster and get on the path to recovery, growth, and resilience. We're making significant progress, particularly in our efforts to reach small businesses owned by women and people of color who, because of long-standing barriers to capital markets and networks, suffered disproportionately from this pandemic, and by many accounts weren't able to access relief. We're seeing the impact, and the latest economic reports do show that small business jobs have begun to rebound and proprietors' income levels have begun to recover. And we're hearing from the small businesses we serve that both our traditional and our new relief programs have created vital lifelines. Earlier this month, we successfully launched the $28.6 billion Restaurant Revitalization Fund. As of Monday, when the application portal closed, we've received more than 372,000 applications, representing over $76 billion in requested funds, and more than half of those applications came from the food and beverage businesses owned by women, veterans, and people of color who, as directed by Congress, received priority access to the program. And we're reaching the smallest of the small food and beverage businesses with 1/3 of the total funds set aside just for them, including a specific set aside I created for businesses with revenues of $50,000 and under. I'm proud of how we rolled out this program in under 2 months while focusing on my key priorities of meeting small businesses where they are and integrating a customer-first, technology-driven, and equitable approach. We also launched the $16.2 billion Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. As of May 25th, the SVOG program has received more than 13,000 applications for approximately $11 billion in requested funds. We started awarding our SVOG funds this week, and we hope to continue to help our nation's venues hold on until they can bring back the performances and experience that are the lifeblood of our American culture. Through our Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan programs, we've now gone beyond $1 trillion in relief. And so far, in 2021, 95% of PPP loans have gone to small businesses with fewer than 20 employees. Our priority across all our relief programs is to get funds into the hands of small businesses swiftly, efficiently, and equitably. At the same time, we're also committed to maintaining a high level of oversight to minimize fraud and abuse while elevating transparency and open communication. We have implemented controls and oversight to better achieve that balance and reversed some of the previous fraud challenges that initially plagued the PPP and EIDL programs. I was pleased to hear both GAO's Bill Scheer and SBA's Inspector General Mike Ware in a recent House committee hearing that transparency at the SBA has improved under my watch and that our relationship is off to a very good start. There is a lot of work to do, but we're working diligently to ensure this relief gets into the hands of the businesses for whom it was intended. Beyond our COVID relief programs, we're also looking to the future and our nation's economic recovery with an eye toward equity. Small businesses are starting to reopen, but they're still reeling from major revenue losses, and most expect recovery to take more than 6 months. This means that we will continue to see the need for capital, which is why SBA is exploring all options to open up capital access, including direct lending. Additionally, we know that the best thing we can do for our small businesses is to help our nation recover from COVID and get our marketplaces and Main Street. 61% of adult Americans who have taken at least one shot of the COVID vaccine, we're making progress. The SBA is doing its part by getting the word out about the American Rescue Plan's tax credit available to small businesses that provide paid leave to employees receiving or recovering from COVID vaccinations. There is so much more work to do. As the voice for America's 30 million small businesses, I will be leveraging every tool at my disposal to bring businesses back, create jobs, and build an equitable economy that works for everyone. I look forward to partnering with you to give all entrepreneurs the tools they need to start, sustain, and grow into the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Paul, and all the members of the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you for your testimony. Let me just follow up on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. You've just given us the most up-to-date information, which looks like we're oversubscribed by a substantial amount over what Congress has provided. Now, I must tell you, this is a bipartisan proposal. The original numbers that I saw were somewhat in excess of $100 billion that was going to be needed. So the fact that you have applications at $76 billion is not really a surprise. I think that's understood. And you're saying about 50% are coming from the target group, the women, veterans, and disadvantaged communities. And you have that set aside for the very small businesses. It looks like you'll have enough resources to handle the 21-day priorities and the set aside, but you're not going to have much beyond that unless Congress provides additional funds. Is that accurate? Well, we need to work on that, and I hope that you will try to fine-tune this as to who's benefiting from the current program, who's been left out, and how much more we need in order to carry out the intent of the American Rescue Plan.
We'd be happy to share that data as we continue to award funds.
Now, on the Shuttered venue program, it looks like to date you have enough resources in that program to meet the need. If I understand correctly, you could accept up to, looks like about $5 billion more if the applications come in. Am I correct on those numbers?
Correct. We can have new applicants, and then, of course, there's a supplemental.
Absolutely. So I want to get to an issue that came up in some of my conversations, and that is the length of time it takes on a PPP forgiveness. We've heard from some small business owners that they've been waiting a long time, that they don't understand the delay, that they haven't been kept informed. Congress took action in December to streamline the process for the smaller of the PPP loans. I shouldn't say smaller, those that are not big of the PPP loans. Is there a reason why there is a delay in approving the PPP forgiveness that we need to know about? We know you have to audit. We know that you have some that where the first applications were rejected and now they filed a second, you put a hold on it. I know there's reasons that you have holds, but could you just share with us if there's any administrative reason why it would take so long to approve those forgivenesses?
No, and in fact, over 60% of those applicants in 2020 have applied for forgiveness and been processed, and it's less than 1% are within those hold categories that we're discussing. It's on average taking the SBA 6 days to process once a lender submits that final approval on forgiveness, and so we feel strongly that the current system is working with those being expedited under 150,000. We know, however, that more forgiveness loans need to come soon. There will be many businesses applying, and so the SBA is ready, talking to lenders to figure out a simplified process as possible to help all of the loans, regardless of size, be expedited through the process.
Well, a 6-day processing time is certainly very reasonable, so that's I'm glad to hear that. Is there a way where a business owner who has not heard within a reasonable period of time can get the status of why the PPP forgiveness form has not been processed?
All of our communication does go through the lender portal. So via the lender, we don't directly engage with borrowers. And so we rely about the requests that SBA has for additional information, if that's the case. In some of the cases, it's a lender hold.
And one last question. Can you just inform me as to the update on the Navigator pilot program, how that is proceeding, and whether you've been able to identify partners and how that is likely to be unfolded?
We've done extensive outreach to start readying partners across the country, and the notice of funding opportunity was published yesterday and blasted out, so we'll continue to try to hopefully bring in as many applicants as possible within the next 45-day window and report back to you once we have some Navigator partners across the country.
Well, we'll be very interested in working with you on that, because on the second round, I'm going to ask you about the EIDL advance, and that's one area where we might be able to get help is through Navigators to connect with more businesses who otherwise are not aware of what they're entitled to under the EIDL advance program. Senator Paul?
Administrator Guzman, I've sent 2 letters to you signed by 50% of the committee members requesting specific information regarding PPP loans to Planned Parenthood affiliates. We have not gotten a response so far. How many first draw PPP loans have been approved to Planned Parenthood affiliates?
So specifically on specific borrowers, the SBA has not commented on specific borrowers.
Well, I'm asking you. I'm in charge of oversight over your trillion-dollar agency, and I'm asking you, how many have been approved?
Well, we don't publicly release that information, and one thing.
So you are in defiance of Congress. You will do what you want, not what Congress wants.
We have provided you a full listing. You
have not provided us with any listing of Planned Parenthood affiliates who've received money. This is an ongoing problem. The previous administration said it was unlawful. This is a big deal. The previous administration said it was unlawful and told them to return the money. Your administration is now giving them money. This is a legal question. This is a big deal. This isn't something you come to Congress and just say, I'm not going to answer the questions.
Not at all. While I can't discuss specific borrower information,
no one is stopping you from discussing this. In your written testimony, you discussed an individual recipient of money through the program. So you are willing to talk about individual recipients. You're just not willing to talk about Planned Parenthood. But there is a legal question here. We want to know how many first draw loans were given. We want to know how many second draw loans. We want to know, since Patrick Kelly, your associate, came here and told us that the affiliate rule has not been reversed. The affiliate rule predated, as far as I'm concerned, the Trump administration. It goes back decades because it was done to protect small businesses. So small business programs were supposed to go to small businesses, not big businesses. So Planned Parenthood has 16,000 employees. The previous administration determined that they're a big business. And yet you continue to give them money, and you won't tell us how much you're giving. You won't tell us if you've reversed your policy. Have you reversed the long-standing affiliate policy that has been part of the Small Business Administration for decades?
No, we have not. And if I may, what we did provide to you is the full listing of all of the PPP loans. So we don't have a specific PPP file, but we did provide to your staff the full listing so that you could look at all of that information, including any Planned Parenthood. Specifically on the affiliation rule, nothing has changed with that regard. However, what I would say is that, specifically on affiliation, what applies here is management.
Apparently the data you sent us that was in collection was sent months ago and doesn't include the new loans. So we want to know about the new loans. I think we discovered the old loans, and now we'd like to know about the new loans. But then we have to have an answer. If it's illegal, according to the Small Business Office, to give money to Planned Parenthood, how did it become legal if you haven't changed the policy? So the previous administration said they are a big business. They said give the money back. You're giving money to the people that the small administration said it was illegal to give money to. That is a conundrum. That is a real problem.
And if I could speak to that letter was not a policy statement. It was not processed. In fact, the letter doesn't exist in SBA systems as it's not a formal process.
Which letter?
The letter that you referenced before in your letters to us about this issue specifically. And so we don't have...
But what are you talking about? The letter? What letter are you talking about? You're talking about the policy?
It's not a policy. How PPP...
So you're saying that the previous administration, when they denied funds to Planned Parenthood, they did not refer to a policy? They did not refer to the affiliate policy, which is the policy? You're saying the affiliate policy is not a policy?
The affiliation rule is a policy. What they were referring to was general. The affiliation rule, as we shared with you in our recent letter to you, and I apologize, that was yesterday, so I'm not sure if you've had a chance to review it, but affiliation arises under certain circumstances. Some of them don't apply to nonprofits in the case of ownership or board, stock options, or relations, identity of interest, which is more for foundations. But where this does apply is on management. And that's either where there's control of the officers.
But you can see how common sense would dictate that you would put something forward saying that you've now reinterpreted the policy to say Planned Parenthood is no longer a big business but a small business. Well, because you're working in direct contradiction to the previous Small Business Administration that said they are a big business. They went through all the same rules you're listing for me, and they concluded that, yes, Planned Parenthood had direct control over the affiliates, that the policies and the actions were dependent on the national branch, and that they did not meet the definition of a small business. And so you are aware that not only is Planned Parenthood a politically controversial agent, entity, but it's also one that the rest of government has controls on. We have put the Hyde Amendment in for decades to try to prevent taxpayer money from paying for abortion. Mm-hmm. But now you're going around the Hyde Amendment, giving them money, but then you're also reclassifying them as not a big business, as a small business, but you're not being forthright.
And if I may, I did not say that I'm not judging on the policy specifically with affiliation for a specific borrower, because again, we do not do that. I'm sharing the affiliation rule with you for your guidance. However, we don't. Basically, the borrowers attest to certain eligibility, and the lenders can rely on that attestation. The SBA doesn't directly.
But they were ruled illegal by the Small Business Administration, and you're reversing that policy, and you're saying, oh, we don't ever look at this. Somebody else, it's a self-attestation. Well, someone determined that they were illegally getting the money and told them to get it back, and now they're getting the money. I don't know how that can happen without an explanation from the Small Business Administration.
And then just to add on to that, the point at which SBA would look at that would be at the point of forgiveness. And so that prior, relationship is attestation by the borrower to the lender.
But that's not the way, when I think it was Patrick Kelly, when he testified, he said you had thousands of ones that you had reviewed for honesty and whether or not they had been honest. And there were lists of people that hadn't been. And apparently Planned Parenthood was on the list. They're still on the list. So they're on a list of people illegally getting it. The policy was send it back, and now you're sending them more. You can see how it doesn't make sense to us. So, and then you're unwilling to comment on it, and you're unwilling to give us information. So my conclusion is that you believe you are above the law. And my only conclusion is that we still want the information. We are here for oversight, that our next step would be to subpoena you. But that's a disappointment to me, because when I voted for you, I thought you said you would be transparent, and it looks like you're specifically hiding this information from us.
And I just one other thing to note is that, again, as we go through forgiveness and the SBA then starts to look at these loans, that's when hold codes can arise as well. Under those circumstances, we'd be happy to continue to work with your staff to provide further information. But again, SBA at this point in those loan processes is obviously relying on the attestation of the borrowers as well as the lenders.
So today, no Planned Parenthood has been forgiven. No Planned Parenthood loan has been forgiven.
That's correct.
So you know the information. You're just not willing to reveal it. So you know all about their information. The record should state you're unwilling to give the information to Congress.
I will certainly support Senator Paul's requests for reasonable information for oversight. I think that's important for the ranking member and any member of this committee to get us information for oversight. I do want to clarify for the record, since I was in the room when the drafting was done on the CARES Act, and it was done in a very careful bipartisan manner. Treasury was also in the room at the time. Small business was under the Trump administration. And we knew that we had a challenge program to nonprofits, since nonprofits were not included in most of the tools available under the Small Business Administration. And there was a lot of give and take as to how we would handle nonprofits, and specific nonprofits were mentioned, and we made it clear we were not going to carve out for specific nonprofits, that we wanted one rule to apply. So the affiliate rule was by design to apply as SBA had applied the affiliate rule previous to the CARES Act, which applied mainly to for-profit entities, not for nonprofit entities. So we recognize that going in, and you are correct in that there was personal attestation. They attest to their certifications, and we wanted SBA to accept that because we wanted to get money out quickly. So I just really wanted to clarify that for the committee. There was no effort made to target into one specific group. We wanted the rules to apply to all nonprofits the same in the former affiliation rules that were used by the SBA. With that, let me recognize Senator Rosen by WebEx. Now we recognize Senator Arono in person.
Thank you. So, Ms. Guzman, it is good to see you again. Whenever we talk about Planned Parenthood, there are all kinds of allegations and perspectives tossed around. But I know that we were not planning to carve out or single out Planned Parenthood or any other nonprofit for any special kind of treatment. So SBA was supposed to apply the affiliation rule in a non-discriminatory way, not depending on the political or any kind of leanings of a particular entity. But by my understanding of the questioning that I just listened to is that the SBA, I suppose under the previous administration, wanted the previously awarded funds to the various Planned Parenthood affiliates back. Is that right? They sent a letter or something, the previous administration's SBA.
That's my understanding from the information Dr. Paul shared.
And when they did that, weren't some procedures supposed to be followed, or does the SBA administrator or somebody there just decides that we're going to get this money back and we're just going to send out letters? Is that what happened, or are there not supposed to be procedures for a reassessment of a previous decision that the SBA had made?
Procedures and process were put in place, and that was previous to that and did not follow that, correct?
So I have serious concerns about why that was not followed. And who was this person who sent out these letters saying to the Planned Parenthood affiliates that suddenly money that had been awarded to them under the program in an objective way needed to be sent back? Who is this person who did that, who signed those letters? Do you know?
Previous administration.
No, is there a name?
Unfortunately, I don't. I know that the document exists as it was included in the documents provided by Dr. Paul, but that letter doesn't exist in SBA.
Mr. Chairman, there should be a letter signed by an actual person in the SBA in the previous administration asking for all this money back. I would request that this committee get this letter.
We'll do our best.
And did you say that there is no record of such a letter within your files?
Within our formal process, our procedures, it wasn't a formal process or procedure.
See, I find that totally amazing that they want to get back millions of dollars without having followed the proper procedure. And then as far as the use of a term like the previous administration had deemed that this was an illegal application, the word illegal is a legal term, and I would not apply that term to what was going on with the SBA and Planned Parenthood. Let's face it, there are people in this body that would like to defund Planned Parenthood at every turn. So let's get back to the paycheck, the PPP program. Before I get to that, let me ask you about the Community Navigator pilot program. Yesterday, SBA launched the Community Navigator pilot program, and I'm very excited about this program because it will provide an opportunity for businesses to learn about resources that are available as they continue to recover from this pandemic. And the program is also a great opportunity for SBA and others to engage with minority businesses. So what should potential community navigators know before they apply for the program? And how will SBA reach out to potential navigators, including those that work with minority businesses?
We've been doing outreach via our field offices as well as through various nonprofits who are collaborating with us to make sure that this information gets out to as many businesses as well as the mayors to make sure that entities can apply. And there's guidance on our website as well as in the Notice of Funding Opportunity with specific advice.
I think that's one of the concerns that we have. Whenever the SBA puts out any new program, that there really has to be quite a lot of outreach and then making the parts of the program very understandable for people who are going to apply to it, because I know you've heard from many of us who have heard from small businesses who have a hard time understanding what's required, what documents, what information, et cetera. So that is an ongoing concern for you folks. And then there have been some programs that were so heavily subscribed that your website crashed. I think I don't know if the restaurant rescue program where you experienced that. I know for the one of the other programs, I can't remember, it was for places that do
the shuttered venues.
Yes, shuttered venues. That site crashed. So that is an awareness that you have, and you're doing everything you can to prevent those things from happening.
Yes, of course, and this won't be at the same scale. They actually will apply through grants.gov.
Thank you. My time is up.
I've been informed by Senator Paul that the letter in question was made part of our record, so we will get a copy of that made available to you. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Guzman, as well, for being here today to testify on the Small Business Administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And our nation's small businesses continue on their very long path to recovery, and it is critical that this committee continues its work with the SBA to ensure that the COVID relief programs we have worked on so hard over the past year, whether it's the Paycheck Protection Program, our Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, and the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, are administered effectively and with transparency. And I know we're having a very lively discussion today. I am going to just point out that the Planned Parenthood issue that's being discussed is very important to a number of us. Senator Paul, the ranking member, has gone through a number of those issues. And we do want to make sure that these funds have been directed to small businesses. So I would just echo the thoughts. We would love your participation and to be able to sort through this and get to the bottom of it. So please, let's continue to look into that. I would like to go ahead, since it's been discussed, we can continue with this conversation as we look for additional information. But I would like to go on to the issue of the economic injury disaster loan fraud that has been raised. There's a number of reports coming from the OIG, and it says that the SBA Office of Inspector General has released multiple reports regarding potential fraud and identity theft within the EIDL program, along with recommendations for tracking identity theft complaints. Can you give us an update on how the SBA is actually working to combat this fraud and identity theft within this specific program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, reducing the risks of fraud and waste and abuse across the board are a priority, and I've informed my team to be very transparent with the IG and GAO. We're working collaboratively to ensure that controls are in place. And beyond that, I've asked them to please consider all those controls at the onset, at the design. A lot of these problems with EIDL fraud did occur in the past year, as originally they were required to issue these loans without tax documents. And so that led to a lot of challenges in their ability to provide oversight. But that was changed in December and implemented in this new year. And so we're seeing a sharp decline in those rates. And but in the meantime, we're collaborating with the IG as well as the GAO to make sure that best practices for controls, fraud control, place across EIDL. And then specifically with identity theft, in February, we did launch a process for businesses who were victims of identity theft to be able to work through those issues with the SBA directly. And so there's now an avenue and a procedure for them to work through those issues.
Okay, so those that have had their identity stolen, you're working with them directly. Are there ways then to recoup the dollars that have already gone out the door to those fraudulent applicants? Are you working with law enforcement agencies? How exactly does that work?
We've increased the number of individuals within our EIDL fraud team as well. And so we have about 160 people that work collaboratively on investigations with the IG. And then, of course, the IG, the DOJ, pursues any specific matters that we find. So we are working collaboratively and to hopefully that end collect the funds.
Okay, and again, I know that there have been so many programs pushed, not just from this committee, but so many other committees, but specifically the programs that we have been working on here, they went out the door very quickly, and there was necessity to do that. So now we are going through the very difficult task of oversight and making sure that not only government funds are protected, but the individuals as well. So identity theft is very concerning. It's serious. We've had some Iowans affected by that, and hopefully we'll be able to work through a number of those issues. I have very little time remaining. I do want to bring up the restaurant revitalization fund as well. I know that we still have a number of those types of venues that are really struggling, and hope that we can continue to work through that as well as we're getting our economy back up and going. But again, thank you for appearing in front of us today, Administrator Guzman, and look forward to working further with you on some of these very concerning issues.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Chairman Cardin, and thank you and Senator Rand for this important hearing. I just, we all have a lot going on today, but we're all here right now because of this issue that Senator Cardin brought up, Senator Ernst brought up. I didn't hear what Senator Paul said, but my guess is we all are very concerned about the restaurant fund running out of money as of yesterday, I guess. And so the $28 billion before the majority of people really had time to apply. So I know my colleague asked you about this, but so I'm sorry if I'm going over some detail here. If Congress would approve more funds, how long would it take to get assistance to those restaurants? And if they've already been in the application process, will they receive priority over people who hadn't already filled out paperwork?
When we first began outreach on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, we encouraged businesses to apply immediately, regardless of their priority or set-aside category, and because it is a first in, first out. And so we would, if we received foreign funding, we would be able to leverage those existing applicants so that we could speedily get these funds out to those who have applied.
Do you have any idea how many applicants you have that were unserved?
Not the specific number of applicants, because we're still working through the specific awards. So there obviously will be an excessive number. We have $76 billion in requests.
Do you have any idea how many restaurants that you're going to serve versus how many applicants you have left? I mean, just any idea, like there's 30% more applicants that we didn't serve? Is there?
I don't have the specific numbers on how many we estimate at this point, but I can follow up and get that to you based on the awards made to date.
That would be great. Would love to see those numbers. And then, so you're saying that fairly quickly is what you're saying. You could get the dollars out the door fairly quickly to those who had already applied, right? Okay. So I also, in April, I think entire Washington delegation sent you a letter about a technical barrier that prevented 120 Washington state distillers from accessing the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. In order to be considered for the grants, entities must have derived at least 33% of their revenue from on-site sales. Washington state law limits distilleries to gain no more than 30% of their revenue from on-site consumption. In my state, distillers sell more through local distribution to restaurants than in the tasting rooms. Could the SBA address this problem, and could you revise the eligibility criteria for restaurant fund to accommodate a limited number of distillers? Washington.
We spoke with stakeholders in order to understand what the marketplace needs were, and we would welcome guidance on that if any additional fund is created.
What does guidance mean? I'm giving you guidance.
If you could,
I'm giving you guidance. It'd be great to solve this problem.
If it could be addressed in statute, that would be great.
Okay. Okay. And then how can we improve the communication with the venue application process? The Save Our, venue.
Right.
How can we improve that?
With the shuttered venues, we encouraged everyone to apply up front. We have a sizable group in both the first priority, second priority, and third priority. We are processing through those applications as quickly as possible. It's a very complex program by statute with various types of entities, which has created a lot of various eligibility requirements along the way, and requires intensive, applicant-by-applicant review. But we have started awarding funds. We've been in communication regularly with the stakeholders. In fact, my team just met with them again this week to give them an update. We'll continue to give them updates as frequently as possible, as well as this committee.
So if people, you'd be surprised then if somebody had submitted an application a month ago and had not heard anything?
we're still in the process of reviewing, so no, I'm not surprised by that, as we obviously in the initial launch had some technical difficulties, and then beyond that have been working through processing and finalizing the technology to run through the review and award disbursement side.
Well, I think this is really important on the communication side. Look, we get the complexity of these and we're moving fast, but it'd be great if people could say, yes, your application was received and it was completed and we're reviewing and we'll get back to you. If they could get that.
I'll verify with my team.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Anyway, I know this is challenging in the complexity of the various programs, given how much SBA played a key role in everything, but I hope that we will continue to look at this revenue side of the equation for restaurants and for other entities and make sure that we're continuing to move quickly as we did on other aspects of the economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Senator Canwell, as I pointed out a little bit earlier, we recognize this is a bipartisan proposal in regards to restaurants. I've already alerted the leadership that we need a vehicle in order to deal with this, and I know that the leader's office is looking at this now. So we'll get the specific information as a follow-up to this hearing, but I do think we're going to need additional funds in this program. We know we need additional funds in this program, and I'm certain we're going to have strong bipartisan support for that. We'll see whether we can find a way to make that a reality. And I also want to just underscore the points you made about knowing the status of an application. I think that's very, very important. Senator Marshall.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and welcome, Administrator. Welcome back to the committee. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund is an example of a government solution to a problem. But as I talk to many restaurants, and really any small businesses for that matter, the biggest challenge they describe to me is getting people to come back to work. And they described to me one of the barriers is we're paying people $15 to $20 an hour to stay at home and not come back to work. I signed a paycheck every other week for 25 years for a group of 300 people, as many as 300 people. And so the obvious comeback is, well, we just need to pay them more to come back to work. But there are certain break points where you just can't afford to, in the restaurant industry, I don't think you can make a profit if you're paying all your starting employees $20 an hour. Are you hearing that? And don't you agree that if we would end the federal supplement that we would be helping these restaurants out quite a bit?
I'm actually hearing a combination of things, and what I've heard is first and foremost, very debilitating, is the ability to attract workers because they have children at home, and so that getting the marketplaces and main streets back to normal, I think, is really tied to those vaccination rates, and so I know that's why President Biden is really pushing to that 70% rate. As people are vaccinated, it becomes safer for everyone to go back to schools, go back to normalcy, and then be able to have the freedom to be able to work. So I know that that's affecting a lot of especially women in the workforce. But in addition, across the board, it has been challenging for businesses to restart up, including attracting workers. But I'm actually hearing a mix of things as well. So what I would say is that continue to try to support them as they grow. I mean, obviously, this influx of funding in the economy has spurred our economic growth as well and enabled people to spend. So I think that I'll leave it to the economists to fully evaluate, the best path forward on that.
Okay. Do you feel Planned Parenthood should receive PPP funds?
I'm not in the business of picking winners and losers, and I follow the policies that are in place at the SBA on that front.
So you're the administrator now. You've read the policy. Is Planned Parenthood, in your opinion, eligible for PPP funds?
I wouldn't even be the one to assess whether or not they're affiliated or not. I know that we have, 80,000 similarly situated type nonprofits, and SBA is, of course, it's the first time that we've had to deal with as many nonprofits, but the affiliation rules that apply are most around management, and we have provided Ranking Member Paul and those who also joined him on that letter some specific outlines, guidance on how the SBA applies the affiliation rule. In the case of PPP, as I shared earlier, the borrower attests to their eligibility, and the bank is allowed to rely on that.
That's kind of my next question. What penalties are currently in place for borrowers who misrepresent themselves on a PPP loan or an idle loan application?
What,
What
I'm
are
sorry.
what are the penalties?
Penalties. Well, it depends if they were honestly misrepresenting, if they were fraudulently misrepresenting or not. SBA provides investigative support to the IG, who would then pursue action with DOJ and
What are the potential
others.
penalties, though, for misrepresenting themselves?
I don't know the dollar amounts. I'd have to follow up with you to find out what those have been, what outcomes we've had.
Okay, let's talk about the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant programs for just a second. It sounds like the first grants are going out this week. Can you describe any other specific issues that remain that could prevent grants from being approved and distributed?
Just that it's a slow process, and as we've shared with our stakeholders, unfortunately, that it's an arduous review process for eligibility, as well as reviewing all the tax documents and everything else for strong fraud controls. So we continue to work through those issues, but don't anticipate any specific issues.
Okay, let's talk about the Community Navigator program and just my concern about it getting out to rural communities. How are you ensuring it's getting out to rural communities? What are you doing, I guess, to market it and get it out there where people that are living, 2, 3, 4 hours away from the main offices?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are definitely the individuals we hope to help with the Community Navigator pilot program. And so our district offices are sharing with their networks broadly, and we've asked them to prioritize reaching communities that are underserved, both rural and urban, so that we can get these navigators funded locally and then giving the information out. So it's just a lot of outreach on our part through existing organizations that are in our network, and we'd welcome an opportunity to work with your office to amplify it further.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Before I recognize Senator Duckworth by WebEx, let me recognize the ranking member for some UCs.
I'd just like to ask unanimous consent. I think we've entered these before, but just to make sure they're there for people. These are the letters to the Planned Parenthood of Washington and Delaware. They're from the Associate Administrator of the Small Business Administration under the previous administration, and I'm told that these letters are not sent without a process. Everyone has to review and sign off on these papers. There is a paper trail. And so it was said earlier that there was no paper trail. There isn't a paper trail, and this was an official policy of the Small Business Administration. And I'd like to ask unanimous consent that they be entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered. And Senator Paul, I'm going to ask that the administrator's response to your letter dated May 25th, yesterday, be made part of the record. And it does answer Senator Marshall's inquiry about the penalties. And they're pretty severe. It's for false statements. It's prison time and heavy fines. Depending on which section is violated, it can be as much as 30 years and $1 million. But the false statements of the SBA generally fall into the 5-year maximum $250,000 fine range. So we'll make that part of the record as well. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. As Administrator Guzman, as it has been discussed today, millions of small businesses are struggling, and they have survived the most trying times of the deadly COVID-19 on the other side. Moving forward, programs established under the American Jobs Plan, including the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Programs, which we've already discussed here today, will be vital in achieving a sustained recovery in my home state of Illinois and in communities across the country. The high demand for participation in this small business recovery program is evidence of the need for continued federal support. However, I am troubled by the prospect of some businesses still being left out if funding runs dry before all eligible entities can apply for relief. In addition, we know that certain sectors of our economy have been hit especially hard and comprise those businesses struggling the most trying to recover. For example, gym and fitness facilities are estimated to have lost roughly 1.4 million jobs, 44% of their industry, and tens of billions in revenue as a result of the pandemic. And despite aggressive COVID-19 relief programs, many gym-based businesses have failed to achieve the financial stability due to months of closures, high overhead costs, and weakened demand. Administrator Guzman, during the worst depths of the pandemic, many in the fitness industry did their part in closing up shop to protect their employees and customers and communities. Would you agree with me that now is the time for Congress to do our part in making sure that this industry receives the helping hand that will enable these small businesses to stabilize and recover?
We definitely agree. In California, I saw the same thing, and I've heard it across the nation. I mean, many industries are hardest hit, including the gyms, and so we'd welcome the opportunity to partner with you to provide you whatever information and support that you need to do that analysis.
Thank you, and I do concur that we must support these businesses, and that's why I was proud to introduce the Bipartisan Gyms Act with Senator Moran. Based on SBA's experience witnessing how much demand exists for targeted assistance among small businesses that were not well suited for PPP relief. And Mr. Grisman, please address how providing $30 billion for the particularly hard-hit fitness and gym industry would support small business owners and their employees while also driving local economic activity.
I wouldn't be able to speak to the specifics, but we know that many small businesses are still hard hit. Obviously, we're focused on trying to get the targeted EIDL advanced program out as well that would provide grants to small businesses and leverage all of our programs to support these smaller entities or these businesses that have seen massive revenue loss over the past year plus.
Thank you. So I'd like to just have my final question be on minority-owned businesses. While we are addressing hard-hit businesses, I want to express my strong support for enhancing efforts to provide relief to minority-owned small businesses. Despite efforts to prioritize disadvantaged small businesses in these federal relief programs, the reality is that we have a long way to go in delivering required support to Black, Latinx, and AA-NHPI small businesses. I commended the Biden administration for improving SBA programs to better support minority-owned small businesses and the communities that they serve, but I firmly believe that Congress can do so much more to accelerate these economic justice efforts. And Mr. Grisman, in your view, what is the most important action that Congress could take to supercharge SBA's efforts to achieve economic justice for historically disadvantaged small business interests? Sorry for the
There are, of course, critical small business, proposals included in the American Jobs Plan. We know that our businesses have a long road ahead of them to recover in the economy, and we want to make sure that they have access to capital, access to markets, including government contracting, as well as access to networks, those resources, those connection points that allow them to grow their businesses. And so we look forward to supporting, administering any programs that are able to come out of that plan.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Markey by WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Guzman, we have a great opportunity here with President Biden's American Jobs Plan to really help small businesses in our country. If you just look over in the climate area for installation of solar panels, insulating homes, bringing them up to the highest standard of efficiency, there's millions of jobs that can be created. So could you tell me what you're doing inside of the administration to advocate for small businesses to be able to fully participate in the plan, especially because they have such incredible job creation potential?
SBA has a wealth of resources, as you all know, that can support innovation as well as those businesses that would be engaging in any infrastructure proposals. We know that small businesses are held back by our aging transportation infrastructure in particular, and see opportunities both for growth in terms of market access as well as growth in terms of contracting opportunities. So we continue to provide information in terms of the type of impact we have seen with our contracting programs as well as our capital programs and our innovation programs, the SBIR, STTR programs that are so valuable to spur innovation across the country.
Thank you so much. And for these small businesses, broadband is going to be absolutely indispensable in terms of their ability to fully participate in hopefully an incredibly expanding economy over the next decade. So, it's absolutely imperative that every small business have access to high-speed broadband in the years ahead. So talk a little bit about why you believe that small businesses have to be central in any national broadband rollout that we add to the statute books of our country over the next year.
Especially with COVID, we've seen that small businesses have adopted technology at high rates. E-commerce continues to grow around the world, and the United States' ability to compete in those marketplaces is really dependent on our businesses having full access to broadband. As a case on the revenue side, the market side access. So for that alone, it's really imperative that small businesses are put at the forefront of broadband discussions.
And SBIR programs and STTR programs have been absolutely incredible in Massachusetts, but in every state in the union, as being incubators that have led to massive job creation in our country. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs in Massachusetts have been created through that program. Could you talk about what an increase in SBIR and STTR programs could mean for small businesses and job growth in our country?
The SBA does play a large role in coordinating efforts of R&D agencies around SBIR, STTR, and we know how valuable that is to furthering the R&D and innovation goals of the United States, the federal government, as well as ensuring startups that commercialization happens and that businesses benefit from that growth. We know that innovative startups, science-based or technology-based companies have a 5x growth in our job growth rate, and so we definitely want to encourage that type of innovation, across the United States, and those programs are really critical in helping to ensure that.
So thank you so much. Thanks for your great work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Administrator Guzman, I would like to. Senator Hickenlooper is available through WebEx. Now that I see that he's on the line, we'll recognize Senator Hickenlooper.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to get caught up on some of this. I've been, like many people, concerned about the slow response with the shuttered venues money going out, and I've heard something about the IRS is somehow part of the reason that even now I don't think any grants have been made, even to those venues that suffered 90% losses. And I might have missed this because I was in another meeting. I apologize. What are some of the details here, and is there anything we can do to try and facilitate, getting these venues back in business?
Yes, what I did share earlier, that the Shuttered Venues Operator Grants Program, that we've started to make awards. It is a slow process, but we have been working closely with our colleagues at Treasury to make sure that any initial challenges with accessing tax information have been overcome. We feel strongly that collaboration is going to yield strong results, and as we already have seen, we've started to make awards. So we are feeling good about the program and our ability to start dispersing awards soon.
Great. Well, I think that's wonderful news. Do we think that spend a couple weeks getting those worst hit venues? That next tranche, I think, is those venues that suffered 70% losses in revenue. Can we get to them in fairly short order? In other words, once we've figured out one log jam and gotten that resolved, that we can move and get that next batch out in, let's say, in 14 days.
There's definitely learnings and efficiencies that we hope to try to leverage. Of course, each of these applications is complex to review from our team, and we do follow a rule of two as well. So there's we'll try to move as quickly as possible to get to those applicants in the pipeline.
Good. I appreciate that. Those are my most pressing questions. I do want to say I think that the SBA has done a remarkable job throughout the entire pandemic, transforming itself into an enterprise that was willing to evolve in very rapid transitions. And I've applied for a SBA 504 loan back in, I guess it was 1991. And the process was somewhat onerous. and just to see how much more flexible and nimble the SBA had become really was gratifying. And we proposed a package of 4 bills to try and help expand the SBA's capacity to, give more access to a more diverse group of borrowers and recipients of support. And I hope that as we go forward, we'll be able to work in partnership on getting some of these, once we get the bills passed, making sure that they get implemented properly.
Yes, thank you. I'd welcome that opportunity.
Great. I'll yield the rest of my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. I can tell you I concur in your observations about the ability of the SBA to stand up these programs and to implement them. And it was a Herculean task, and it made a huge difference in our economy for small businesses, no question. Administrator Guzman, I want to, maybe we'll continue this through a more informal process, but to get an update as to how we're dealing with the EIDL grant program. I am really concerned. This is the really only program for low-income communities, and it's a challenge. So I hope either through the Navigator program or through the other resources at SBA and your resource partners, we will make an effort to reach this hard-to-serve, underserved community. Because this is a lifeline, and we want to see these businesses survive. And we think these grants, particularly the 2 levels of grants, are important for the survival of disadvantaged small businesses. So I would ask you to work with us as to how we can do a better outreach to get this program in a more used way. We have resources available. We want to see them go to the intended purpose.
Yes, thank you for that. And we concur, and we have been, evaluating what we can do to improve the outreach and improve outcomes. Obviously, we've done the initial outreach to the priority period, to the priority groups first, and those were those who had already applied. We sent over 10 million emails, sent another over 3.5 follow-up emails with a pretty good open rate. And so we continue to try to work with those constituents. And then in early June, we will be opening up the platform so that those applicants after December 27th in the pipeline, as well as just the general public of those eligible businesses, can apply. So low income with those losses. We're continuing to look at how we can simplify the process, is obviously providing tax documents and that revenue history is a challenge. So as much as we can help them walk through that process, we will.
And please keep us informed. We want to work with you together on that issue. My last request is that be interested, as the PPP program's coming to an end, how well the administrative changes on returning citizens and those with student debt, how they were utilized. I would be just interested in seeing the results from that administrative change. And then the changes we made in December to your core programs, how effective that has been in making the core continuing programs of the SBA more useful for small businesses. If you could get us that information, I would appreciate it.
Yes, we'd be happy to.
Senator Rono, anything else? With that, we thank you very much. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for questions. We ask that you try to respond as quickly as possible. And with that, the committee will stand adjourned, thanking the administrator for her accommodations today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.